Hi, everyone. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Feller. I'm the CEO, President, Founder of GSD, Get Shit Done Venture Studios, family offices, PR, and marketing group. Today, I'd like to welcome you to our show, GSD Presents Top Global Startups with Chris Purdie. We bring together the founders, innovators, and visionaries shaping the future of the global economy. As I said, I'm Gary Feller, and I'm the CEO, President, and Founder of GSD. Today, we're going to talking about building through regional conflicts, scaling Middle East startups. We often talk about scaling startups in stable environments, but what happens when you're building in regions marked by uncertainty, geopolitical tension, and rapid change? My guest today is someone who's not just navigating that complexity, but thriving in it. Chris Purdie is a founder and CEO of Receiptable, a company reimagining how financial data, receipts, and expense intelligence are captured and utilized in a digital-first world. But more importantly, Chris is building and scaling in one of the most dynamic and challenging regions globally. This conversation is about resilience, adaptability, and opportunity, because where people see risk, others see opportunity. Great founders see asymmetric upside. So with that, I'd like to welcome Chris to the show. Hey, Chris.
Hello, Gary. Thanks very much for having me on. Hello from sunny Dubai this afternoon, and good morning to people that are watching in the US.
So let's start with your journey. What led you to found the company Receiptable?
Listen, Gary, I spent the last 15 years working in fintech, pretty much seen everything evolve in the world of payments to get more convenient and get more secure for consumers. The one thing that frustrated me that never went away was that I could pay with my watch and still get given a big piece of paper at the end of almost every single transaction I ever made in store. And so we set about to build a platform that could beam a digital version of that receipt straight to the phone you already have in your pocket without changing anything about the way you shop as a consumer, and that's what we've built, and it now powers the customer engagement channel for some of the biggest retail groups and financial institutions here in the Middle East.
Why the Middle East? Was that intentional from day one, or did the opportunity evolve?
Certainly say the opportunity evolved. A lot of my experience was in Europe, in Africa, in North America, but also here in the Gulf region. We looked at a lot of different markets when we were looking for an initial launch. And when you're starting any kind of startup venture, you're looking for what are the shortcuts that I can take. And one of the things that really stuck out to us about this region was that the financial institution banking landscape wasn't as fragmented as it was in North America or in Europe. The arrival of neobanks was yet to shake up this region as much. And the same goes for the retail side, and they're really the two cornerstones of our business, the financial institutions and day-to-day retailers. And there was much less fragmentation within the retail landscape. All of that added up to kind of perfect storm as a place to begin this business. And also the support we got early days. We had looked at Europe, we had looked at Canada. One day I went to a trade show right at the very start of the journey here in Dubai, and we were approached by a number of the biggest financial institutions in the region who, instead of bouncing the idea around for 6 months, which is what we were getting used to a little bit in Europe or North America, it was a case of, can you come into the office and pitch this to the senior leadership team next week? So things happened very fast for us here. Within a couple of months, we had our first institutional investor here in the region, and really things spiraled from there. I made it home.
Many founders underestimate regional dynamics. What's misunderstood about building startups in the Middle East?
What's misunderstood? I find it hard to look at a region through perhaps North American eyes because I know it so well and I've built here in the past. I think maybe one thing that is massively overlooked by the rest of the world is the appetite for all things digital. This sheer kind of volume of youth, over 30% of people in the region are under 30. The population keeps growing rapidly. If you're in the fintech space or anything that touches tech and digital payments, the growth of digital payments here almost outstrips every other region in the world. The list goes on. There's a lot that is overlooked. We're very happy to be some of the ones that are building and excelling here.
I was with M-Pesa when I was down in Nigeria. I got invited by Jim Ovid to go to Zenith Bank and to speak in front of Zenith Bank, and had dinner with Dangote's brother, Sayu. And it was interesting to see how much things are growing in that area on the continent, right? It's unbelievable, actually. And sometimes it's overlooked and underestimated. How do you, if you look at regulatory, cultural, and economic differences from country to company, how do they shape your go-to-market strategy? Because it could be vastly different.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you reference M-Pesa, which served a very specific need across large parts of the African continent, as did some of the competitors from the other mobile operators, where effectively you had a shift from cash to mobile wallet payment that completely leapfrogged banks altogether, and telcos became the backbone of economies there. I'd say we're in a very different world here in the Gulf region, where the adoption of mobile payments that you'll be much more familiar with, your Apple Pays, Google Pays of the world. Apple Pay and Google Pay combined is something like 75% of the transactions that go through our platform that go on to generate a receipt. From a regulatory point of view, we actually started life as a business in Bahrain. Why was that? It was because the central bank had a sandbox environment to birth and grow fintechs and become a leading hub in the region. And many of the neighboring countries around look to that small market as the leading light where innovation happens, and that allows you to use it as a testbed market and grow out into the wider MENA region.
If you look at it, what kind of advantages does the region offer, and how does the current conflict situation, how's that impacting business?
Well, look, Gary, if we'd been sat on this show 6 weeks ago, then I don't think we would have titled it, Scaling Through Regional Conflict. Stability and growth was one of the big things that attracted not just startups like us to the region, but many of the world's biggest technology companies to have operations here. I guess your question is, what's going on right now on the ground and how is it affecting business? Uncertainty is the word. Uncertainty is bad, whatever line of business you're in, and we're experiencing a degree of uncertainty on the ground right now. What we're not seeing, we're not seeing huge downturns. We're not seeing huge layoffs. Right now, what we're seeing is a little bit of nervousness, sure. We're not seeing people leaving the region en masse as many predicted. There's a huge volume of expats in the region. Personally, I can count the people I know on one hand that have decided to get out of the region for a little while until things cool down. So we're seeing a degree of uncertainty. We work very closely with a lot of the big retail groups here. Clearly, depending on the sector, certain retailers are seeing a downturn in footfall.
Hmm.
That's natural. They're seeing some supply chain issues, and they're actively looking to resolve those supply chain issues and find other ways to get goods and get food into the stores.
So, how do you navigate the fragmentation across countries in the region versus scaling in a single large market like the US?
That's a great question. I think it would be foolish to make the presumption that you can launch in a single market here and rinse and repeat whatever you've built around the whole region. Um, but I think you already touched on one of the topics that does help you to scale quite quickly, and that's a lot of regulatory similarities between the countries in the region. Also, from a pure kind of travel, being in front of your clients and being in front of your different teams once you start to spread your wings into the different countries. That's really very straightforward from a networking point of view. I think there's very few places in the world that are as easy to network and get your business out there as you can here. This is a region of entrepreneurs and a region of builders with big ambition, backed by a lot of government ambition, a lot of government support for startups to scale here and then go global.
So you look at these geopolitical tensions, how do they impact the hiring, the capital access, and customer acquisition? You're saying basically it hasn't really changed right now, correct?
Um, Look, I think we're yet to see. We're a month in right now,
Hmm.
so I don't really want to get carried away. Um, we've been told a couple of times now that it's all going to be over in a couple of weeks. We'll wait and see how that pans out. To answer your question, when it comes to fundraising, yeah, clearly I think there will be a delay in deployment of funds. You've got to bear in mind that there is a increasingly mature bunch of VC firms that are here in the region with very clear mandates to invest into the region. I think there will be delays, but I think many founders will perhaps be looking to extend runway right now where they can, and perhaps pushing back the fundraising rounds that they had planned over the course of the pre-summer window. I think for many startups will now turn into we will go out to market to fundraise in September with a view to closing this time next year. So I think there's going to be delay to the cycle without a shadow of a doubt. When it comes to hiring, again, we're in a time of a little bit of uncertainty. I think a lot of founders are going to be thinking, okay, maybe we're just going to slow that hiring down, that hiring plan down a little bit. What I haven't seen so far is any degree of layoffs from companies. A lot of people right now are just battening down the hatches a little bit, being sensible and seeing how things play out week by week.
Have you had moments where you yourself question continuing, and and what pulled you through?
Well, look, I've been through a few cycles already, shall we say. So I was actually back in Europe when everything blew up. I'm having a coffee in bed on a Saturday morning. I look at my phone and I turn around to my wife and I go, "Oh shit, it's happened." And for a couple of days, yeah, there was a real degree of panic when you've just invested um, all your life's energy into a startup for the last couple of years in a specific region, and a major conflict breaks out. You absolutely get into panic mode. I had a very panicked weekend. I got into the start of the week. I said, okay, it looks like this is all gonna blow over pretty quickly. That was my second cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get into the third cycle of saying, okay, this looks like we're now talking about weeks or months rather than days. How are we going to react to this? What are the opportunities that it perhaps brings about? And number one, how am I going to look after my team?
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that any leader needs to do in turbulent times is look after their teams. They will look back at those turbulent times and remember how the companies they worked for looked after them.
What lessons have you learned about leadership under pressure that founders in stable regions might never experience?
I mean, we used to call it a black swan event. I like to call it a black Trump event now. These real unpredictables that come along.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things that you simply can't plan for. We have a lot of data sovereignty legislation here, which meant that our teams very specifically housed some of our data in AWS data centers in specific countries, which were subsequently attacked. And how do you prepare for that? You architect your systems in ways that you can migrate and be back up and running very quickly. Were you planning for war? No, you weren't. Of course you weren't planning for war. You were just planning to make your system scalable and transferable to other regions as you grow. What are the lessons that I've learned? I think I've learned that when things like this come up, you really can't panic. You really have to train yourself. However much panic is actually going through your mind, you have to train yourself to take a deep breath and say, okay, in the midst of all of this chaos, I've got a bit of voice of reason, I've got a bit of voice of positivity, I've got a bit of voice of stability in front of my team, my customers, and my investors, in that order. And that's really what I've learned over the last few weeks is however uncertain things may seem, how do I get a grip on that? How do I relax and say, okay, this is our path. How do you communicate that to the people around you?
Do you think has fundraising? Do you see it being impacted now yet, even though it's because of the perception and risk? And do you think the international investors leaning in, or are they staying cautious?
Well, I'll give you a little anecdote. 3 days after this broke out, I was talking to a super early stage founder. He had just got to the stage of raising from a couple of angel investors. He was getting his first raise in. Safes were all out there. And he said, Chris, I just don't feel like I can ask the guys to wire the funds right now. I said, why? He said, you've just signed safes with a bunch of angel investors that write many angel tickets all year. They know exactly what they're doing. What on earth stops you sending over the wire transfer details and asking them to wire the money? I think there's an idea that capital is just going to dry up overnight because of what's going on right now. That's not happening. Capital is not disappearing overnight. But to your point around more international investors that are coming into the region, I think it would be foolish of me to predict that certain global investors and certain global VCs may just cool their boots a little on this region over the course of the next few months. What I don't believe is that is going to disappear forever. You've got a lot of very resilient businesses here. You've got a lot of businesses that are still growing every day despite what's going on. And the businesses here don't become uninvestable overnight. Good investors will still invest in good businesses come rain or shine.
What advice would you give to investors evaluating Middle East startups today?
Look, I think I'd be having a long, hard look at what is the specific sensitivity of that business to what is going on right now. I certainly know there's been a big influx of investment into prop tech businesses over the course of the last 12 to 24 months. Clearly, some of the businesses in that sector are going to be quite exposed to a property market that is maybe going to cool down a little bit for the midterm. I'd be encouraging to look at the real sensibilities around the sectors they're in. But I think more than ever, they're going to be looking at how scalable is this business internationally. And the thing is, Gary, the Gulf region was always going to be quite a limited market. It's a great place for many businesses like ours to begin life and to begin scaling quickly. But the vast majority of businesses that end up being backed by VCs are backed by VCs because those VCs see them as having potential to really scale internationally. So I'd be looking at the businesses that have maybe already started taking those baby steps into an international growth plan.
And so what about Receiptable over the next 3 to 5 years? Are you going to stay there? Are you going to move to some place like Silicon Valley? What do you want to do?
Look, this has been a great base for us for the last 2 years, and we're growing quickly here right now. The underlying beauty of the technology that we've built is that it works on the payment rails and the payment terminals of almost every payment provider in the world. We very much have a channel partner approach, so we work with a lot of manufacturers of payment terminals. We work with a lot of very global financial institutions, and a big part of our roadmap now already looks beyond the Middle East region and starts to look to Europe and why not North America beyond that.
And, it's fantastic. If you had to distill your experience into one principle about building in uncertainty, what would it be, Chris?
Oh, big question. One experience from building in uncertainty. I could probably distill it into place trust in the people that you hired. What I have seen over the course of the last 4 weeks is a bunch of great people that joined the business, show up every single day, even when some of them have had to move over borders into other countries for safety and shift to work from home, like back in COVID times, rise up and deliver in the face of a lot of uncertainty. Just last week, our team shifted our entire deployment from one AWS instance in Bahrain to another one in Europe to have our platform back up in under 48 hours. So that's my real learning of this time of uncertainty is place that trust in the people you hired, and they will surpass your expectations sometimes.
Do you think adversity is actually a competitive advantage for founders in a volatile region?
100%. I think some of the best founders that we come across, that we've been in accelerator schemes with here, that we are, part of the same portfolio of companies with some of our VCs here. Some of the strongest founders I've ever met typically come from some pretty dicey countries or war-torn countries or places where they have come from really, really challenging backgrounds and challenging markets to build in.
I lived in Russia 12 years, so I speak a bit of Russian and was a professor at one of the top business schools there. Left in 2015 once the Crimea stuff started, and came back to Silicon Valley and founded one of the first generative AI companies. So I've been around unpredictable situations, financially unpredictable, et cetera. And it does make you stronger, but it also makes you a lot more sensitive to changes in the market because you can understand what's happening before other people see it. How do you balance speed versus risk when the environment itself is unpredictable?
Look, I think at a certain stage of a startup's life, and it's probably the stage that we're in right now, um, we don't really balance risk or speed at any point. We're always trying to go as fast as we possibly can. When it comes to balancing risk, sure, we're taking a look at the different countries in the region, and we're maybe looking to the ones where the bet feels a little bit less risky right now in terms of where we channel our energy and our resources. There are certainly countries here right now out of the GCC set that are offering that little bit more stability, and that's where we're going to be placing some of our bets over the course of the next 6 months.
Could the Middle East become a global hub for next gen fintech or AI, and why? Because you've heard a lot about it, right? You hear about the, banking the unbanked and companies like Receivable. Do you think that's going to be a hub, and why do you think that's so?
I think it arguably already is quite a significant hub. You've got some significant sovereign investment into AI throughout the region. You have got a raft of incubators and capital available for companies that want to come build here. You have a number of schemes that are bringing founders from other countries into the region to come and hire talent here. And I think the big change that I think we've really seen over the course of the last few years is a rapidly growing talent pool, in a way that you were maybe fighting a little bit not so many years ago to persuade people to come and live and work in the Middle East. Today, that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing a significant talent pool that's already here on the ground, that's now maybe moving into their second or third tech company here. And we're still seeing, even with what's going on in the region right now, we're still seeing a huge volume of people that want to come and move, whether that's from Europe or elsewhere, that want to come and start a life in this part of the world and do it working for a tech company. So we're certainly seeing a continued growth of that talent pool.
Chris, we're coming up to the top of the show. This has been an incredible conversation. What you're building is not just a company, it's a blueprint for resilience and global scaling in complex environments. To everyone listening here, the name of our company is GSD, Get Shit Done. It's not about the talk, it's about the action. We're in 73 countries ourselves around the world with 185 companies. Chris, thanks so much for joining today. And what are your closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
Look, Larry, closing thoughts is this. We've talked a lot about turbulent times over the last half hour. What I don't want to do is leave anyone with the perception that it is all doom and gloom, and it's going to be doom and gloom for the foreseeable future in the Middle East. That is absolutely not the case. We're seeing huge resilience from all of the companies around us, whether they're big corporates all the way down to some of the smallest startups. So we're seeing a very positive outlook. I posted on LinkedIn just yesterday. We started the week with a lot of gloomy skies. The sun is back out shining. People are back out in retail stores and restaurants, and everyone is back into the office. Things are looking pretty positive, and we think that within the next few weeks or months, it will be very much business as usual here once again.
Yeah, that's great. And how do people get a hold of you?
So the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. So / Christopher Purdie on LinkedIn, but you'll find me very easily by just putting Chris Purdie into the search bar. And if you want to go and check out what the business does, it's receiptable.co.
That's fantastic. Fantastic, Chris. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thanks to all of you for joining one time more time. GST Presents Top Global Startups. My name is Gary Fowler and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And I'll be back again soon with another exciting edition. And Chris, if you want to stay on for a few minutes after the show, happy to speak to you. Thanks,
Absolutely.
everybody. And thanks
Thanks,
so much.
Gary.